Okay, this is a 30-second commercial, and I'm going to throw a lot of numbers at you, but please stay with me. In just 15 minutes, you could save 15% or more on car insurance. This company has been offering great rates and great service for over 75 years, and anytime you need help, you can speak to one of their trained specialists 24/7. That company is Geico. Go to geico.com today. Sorry for all the numbers, and in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I'm out of time.
Now, Podcast One brings you Spike's Car Radio. A downloadable cars and coffee, hosted by writer, comedian, and automotive enthusiast, Spike Ferriston. Now, here's Spike.
Welcome to Spike's Car Radio, everybody. We're here for a very Porsche-centric show. Zuckerman's already in a bad mood. He's already pissing and moaning at me because I'm trying to get on with the show and not waste everybody's time here. What?
It's 10 o'clock, and that's not... This is prime...
It's 10:06.
And this is prime money-making time for me. You have interrupted
Nobody
my
cares.
money-making.
For a Californian, 10:06 is 10 o'clock.
Nobody cares. If you're here, if you're listening, there's another voice in the room, and that is the voice of... Geez, I don't know. Porsche, what's the best way of describing this guy? First of all, an automotive journalist, unparalleled Porsche
excellence.
Enthusiast and knowledgeable. His name's Pete Stout. He was the editor of Panorama Magazine, the editor of Excellence Magazine, and he's here with his new, is it fair to say, magazine? Do we call this a magazine?
Yes.
000.
We call it a magazine.
And we're going to hear all about it. Pete, thanks for coming in. This is going to be so much fun. I'm so excited to have you here because we can just sit and talk Porsches for the next, well, I was going to say an hour, but Zuckerman was late. So the next
54 minutes. 54 minutes.
I don't know if the listener can hear that.
I'm joking. I was late yesterday, by the way.
Well, I can already tell we're going to have fun because it's been a while
totally
since that
fine.
lunch we had on the coast, which
That was a great lunch.
I seem to recall I got in the car with you, Spike, in your red car.
Right.
And we got to enjoy that exhaust for, I think it was 3 gears.
3 gears. That was back in Monterey, Pebble Beach Car Week, and Jerry, Paul, and I brought cars up there, and we bumped into you, Pete. And we always take a nice drive, and we go have a little food at Nepente. Is that where we
That's
go,
where we
Zuckerman?
went.
Right. And Pete Stout was hanging around. He goes, hey, do you mind if I come with you guys? And we went, absolutely, because we knew not only you're far more knowledgeable about the Porsche brand than we are, we knew you had a bunch of good stories to tell us. And maybe today we can talk about some of those stories. I know right off the bat, we took a drive. I think we had a 73 RS, the Tangerine car, 8-ball, the 68 Trans Am car. And what did Jerry have?
He had first 911.
Oh, only the first.
Only
911.
the first 911.
Only the first 911. And you rode in everybody's car.
Yeah, I rode in everybody's car.
And it was so much fun to have you there. And then we stopped at Nepente. We went out on the patio, and we talked about Porsches for about 2 hours. And one of our favorite stories and can we talk? Actually, I don't know.
Can we out you on that story?
The Cat Bob story.
It's not fun if you don't out me on some stories. So.
Well, the first story that we loved was the story of Cat Bob.
Yeah, we'll leave him as Cat Bob. We'll leave him as somewhat nebulous. As Cat Bob.
That's Cat Bob.
Right.
Okay.
That made us laugh. It still makes us laugh.
Oh,
Well,
yes.
it also was intriguing because it involved a very beautiful car, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Take us through this story
special.
a little bit. Let's talk about the Cat Bob story.
Yeah, so it's a car that it's been seen a couple of times, but not very often. We did a story on it in Panorama. We may do something on it in 000 in more depth because really it's a car that deserves more pages than you can allot to it. You know,
Right.
In a typical magazine article, you can do maybe 5, 7, 9 pages. 13's a big deal, and now I can do things in the neighborhood of 30, 40, in one case 90 pages on a single car.
Because that car says so much not only about Porsche, it really says tons about Porsche and
Yeah.
tons about a guy.
And this car deserves that story because it is, to date, the most exclusive car they ever built. It's the wildest Sonderwünsche car that they
Well,
ever
everybody
built.
is out there listening now going, what car is he talking about?
And
So it began with a Carrera 3.2. It started out with a guy who decided he wanted to just go get a black 911 coupe. That's just all he wanted. So he walked
In the 80s.
In the 80s. So he walks into a Manhattan dealership and orders a black Carrera coupe. But he hates the vinyl dash, which I happen to love. I like that. I like it for like all its graininess and all its, cheap vinyl, just industrial self. I just love that stuff. And you can still get it in a 991. You can, if you skip the leather, it comes with that sort of G50-ish. It kind of comes with that G50-ish vinyl dash.
There's nothing I love better than that dash.
Why
would
dig
you want
it.
leather?
Well,
Right.
so this guy wants leather. Inexplicably, he wants leather. Lots of people who like leather. And so he goes in and he says, I just don't like that vinyl dash. So what can you do about that? Can I get leather? And they said, well, yeah, you can get leather. We'll order it. So they come back to him and say, Bob, we're sorry. Can't get the leather. There's a moratorium on it in the United States because some consumer laws here allowed people who were having their leather dashes wilt in the sun in Arizona and Southern California warranty those dashes, and Porsche didn't want to deal with it. So they refused. So PCNA said no. So then Bob being Bob.
And that's Porsche Cars North America.
Yes, Porsche Cars North America. Yes, exactly. Interrupt me at any time for these things. I tend to speak in acronyms, which is a terrible habit. It's a terrible habit. So Bob starts calling people randomly in Germany, just finds phone numbers and just starts calling.
Love this guy.
Bob is he lives in
Manhattan.
In Manhattan.
Successful guy.
Yes, successful guy.
Self-made.
And a bit of an eccentric.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Right.
But a good guy. I've been talking to this guy on the phone for 20 years, and I actually really enjoy our phone calls typically.
Right.
So he calls Germany and just keeps calling phone numbers until he gets someone who says, yes, we can do that for you.
But he's calling the factory. He's not just calling random people in Germany going.
I think he's got he probably, knowing him, he probably had a phone book mailed in from Stuttgart. I'm guessing something like this.
This is pre-internet days.
That's right.
Yeah.
You got to think about this.
Directory.
This is 87, 88, something like this.
He papered his bedroom wall with loads of pictures and yarn connecting faces and the whole deal.
So they say, okay, we can do it. We'll do it. So somehow he puts one over on PCNA and gets this done. And then they say, well, it's the 89 will be the last year for the turbo. The 911 turbo. It's going to be the last year, and it's kind of a special thing. We're going to do a 5-speed transmission, and we've never done that. Would you like a 5-speed transmission? Would you like a turbo? And the classic upsell.
Right.
And so he says, okay, I'll do a black turbo 5-speed. Great. So then they call and say, it's going to be the last year also for the slant nose, and this could really become something special. And so it sort of snowballed at that point. And at that point, it became a turbo slant nose cabriolet, which back in the day, I'd have to go back to the Car and Driver article, but I think those things were about $30,000 as an option package.
You're into the deep six figures with this car in the late 80s. That's a lot of dough
for a car, right?
But that's just the beginning of this story, because at that point, somehow it turns into the last 930, the last one.
The very last one, period.
The last car. And judging by Spike's face, I think you might have forgotten that detail.
Yeah, I did.
It's the last car.
I did not know that.
What it ended up snowballing into was leather everything. And
everything.
I do mean everything. The seatbelt plungers. The seatbelt plungers, for lack of a better term. I'm not sure what you call those things. Tangs. But those things, the plastic around that is leather with hand stitched.
Really?
It has a battery cutoff like a race car. The red, the typical red switch that goes in the front trunk, that is red leather.
Wow.
Everything on this car, the gauge faces, the odometer.
The gauge faces are
Inside.
the detail that I was so offended by. I was just like, the faces of the gauges are covered in leather.
It's
How many
amazing.
cows died for this car in your opinion?
At least it isn't alligator skin. At least it's not VDO and alligator skin.
Right.
But,
Excuse me. But even the like a crocodile watch band, I like the way that looks. But I've seen that car because I saw the pictures of it. It doesn't look so bad.
It doesn't
come on leather face gauges.
I just don't. Getting off on leather is such a weird.
But you realize, at the point that's in the special wishes department will cover stuff in leather, so they have these little cobblers that are there with their leather and their sewings.
I know, but
isn't the convertible top leather too?
No, the convertible top's not leather, but
the convertible
but the convertible top is a trip all by itself. So the convertible top has a leather tonneau cover. So you're right on that.
Oh, man.
And then it has an automatic sensor that if it's raining, it will put the top up. Not that this car has ever been outside in the rain. Although I heard at one point it was during a photo shoot, it began to rain and it became immediate that the car went back in the trailer. But there's a sensor in the interior that if it's raining and the top is down, it puts the top up unless the leather tonneau cover is in place. And then it knows not to put the top up. So this thing, it's got leather gauge faces, leather buttons for the odometer reads, that tiny little stick that resets the odometer. And then those freaky rear windshield wiper switches on G50 911s, that's sort of that tiny little bezel that's sort of the scattergun ergonomics of those cars. We don't know where to put the sunroof button, so we're just going to put it under the tack here. Well, all of that is covered in leather, even the bezels. So everything on this car is in leather. 17-inch BBS wheels from the factory when they only did 16s.
Covered in leather.
Covered in leather.
Leather tires.
Leather 16
leather
transmission.
gasoline.
Leather 6-speed
leather
transmission.
face mask.
Yeah, where is
leather chaps.
Where is Fallon
Leather
where you need him for a leather
My
skit?
leather pimp hat, and then I get in it. How do you enjoy leather, Pete Stout? You know what I mean? How do you enjoy leather switches?
Okay, so I got to tell you, true confession, I just learned that I'm not a leather dash guy. I ordered a car with a leather dash.
Right.
Not liking the leather dash. It's not for me.
But the new cars don't have any leather smell, and that car must smell like a brand new Italian shoe.
That was when they were still using, I believe, Roser leather. Do you guys know about Roser leather?
No, I want to know what the difference in smell is, though.
So I would like to know that, too, and now I wonder if there's a way to do that. I might go see this car soon, and now you've got me very curious. I've never seen the car in person. I've only seen photos of it. Oh, no, that's not true. I did go see it. I stopped in New Jersey, and that was a interesting evening.
How many years did it take for this car to actually come out? Because it didn't come. He didn't get it in '89.
1991. 1990 delivered in 1991.
Oh, jeez.
They're making 964s, right? They're deep into 964s.
Now wait for it. There's
a special wish.
A plaque. I believe it's gold plated. It might be brass plaque in the front trunk that's
not leather.
Signed, not leather. Signed by Ferry Porsche that says, "This be the last. Amen."
Because he kept asking for other shit.
Well,
So
exactly.
It says what?
It says amen because I think they were happy to see this project go.
This be the last?
This be the last. Amen.
This be the last.
It was the last 930. Last true torsion
because they
bar
couldn't
on
get
that
it out of the
electric
factory.
So
They
now
couldn't
is
get it
the-
out of the works department.
And is this guy now driving this car still?
No, the car, that's one of the more interesting aspects. The car has never been driven. It's both heartbreaking and also intriguing. His view is that the car is art. His view is that the resulting car, what it started as a Carrera 3.2 with only one option. I forgot that detail. All he wanted was a leather dash. Nothing else. Just a leather dash
that was
and door
in there.
top.
You said that, and it grew into this monster project.
That cost more than a 959 when new.
Whoa. Think
and
about that.
I think there were trips on the private jet. Am I allowed to say this part?
Those stories are amazing.
That's where the nickname.
Some of those
that's where
might
the Cat
be
Bob stories come
so
in.
that actually comes. The Cat Bob comes from a different spot, and that was
his fondness for his cat.
his fondness for his cat. And then when
Nick.
I got married, I got my wife a cat as a wedding gift. Partly because my father had gotten my mom a cat as a wedding gift, and I saw how much it meant to my mom, and so I think there's somewhat Pavlovian response. I'm not quite sure
Did
all
your
these
wife
things.
like that cat gift that you gave
well,
her?
the curiosity with that cat was the cat loved me and hated my wife.
Always works that way.
And in fact, in our long haul in San Francisco, I would come home and the thing would come running down the 20-foot hall and do a dance for me. Although otherwise, if you tried to touch it, it'd take a hand off. It was an awful cat. But my wife would walk up to the front door, and one time I was gone on a business trip, and the cat comes around the corner, sees that it's my wife, stops, turns around, and leaves. So that was the relationship my wife had with this cat.
Quite a gift.
But nonetheless, I knew that Bob loved cats, so I sent him a photo of Piper, and he responds with, "Your cat is now posted in the halls of Weissach Flacht, where there are many cat enthusiasts." And so
We have to meet this guy.
I
had arranged to meet. I thought we had arranged a meeting while we were in New York.
If
you didn't come, right?
No, Jerry decided he didn't want to do it.
Well, then we should go sometime.
We should all go when we're in
Let's
New
go
York.
sometime.
I'm going to be in New York very soon.
I need to get there soon.
Here's the part I remember, and you can cut this if you want. But
I'm not
I
gonna cut
remember the
anything.
cat. I remember the cat got sick.
It's amazing.
I remember this is the part, the crazy guy with a lot of money.
Love this.
and I shouldn't say crazy.
So that's connected to the PCCB story, and I don't think Bob. I'm venturing on my friendship a little bit here, but I think Bob would be cool with it, especially since we're not identifying him by name per se. But basically, Bob was building a hot rod. And the thing about Bob that you have to remember with the slant nose as well as anything else is it's not a matter of money, it's a matter of what can. And the guy is interested in what can be done. So it doesn't matter. It becomes a thing of what else can you cover in leather? So in this case, he was building how light a brake caliper can you build? How light a brake system can you build? I mean, the slant nose was not all leather. It's 6-speed transmission, 17-inch wheels. There's other tricks to that car that are mechanical. So he's always had an interest in the engineering side. So I think he ordered or somehow got a set of PCCB brakes back when these were the hot thing for a 996, GT2, GT3. And if he had to did you ever have to replace a set? It's not pretty. It's 20, 30, 40K. The car was 100, 120. 180, depending
Didn't
on
that
what
start a whole carbon fiber obsession with this guy? And
yeah, for sure. He was before that. He was on the leading edge of that before that with his 964. He was doing all the carbon fiber stuff. So he was intrigued by these carbon ceramic brakes. So he ordered a set from Porsche and quickly decided that they were not light enough for him. He was interested in redoing them in beryllium, which of course was outlawed in Formula One. And you're not supposed to touch with your hands or
anything. You're not supposed to touch beryllium,
or breathe near it or whatever the deal is. But it stops the car safely. It might kill you in the process.
Faces,
your pit crew might not make it to the next race. But
honey, here's some beryllium for our wedding present. There you go.
So Bob goes onto a Porsche forum and says, "Here's the deal. I got this set of brakes for free." He just out with it. He just said, I got this set of brakes for free, and I will give them to anybody here who donates $8,000 to this university, which happens to be the university of his favorite cat doctor in the United States, whom he did fly his cat to in a private jet for surgery. So, and legend has it that he actually did an emergency landing at one of the airports in the greater New York area with. So
in the middle of a storm.
Exactly.
Because the cat was sick.
Because the cat was sick. And he said, land it now.
This
he
guy
walked up to the
his
front.
Cat, and he loves Porsches.
Yeah, he loves his cat, loves his Porsches. So
and he loves beryllium.
And he loves beryllium.
And leather everything.
So he goes he goes on the forum and says, here's the deal. I'll give these to anybody who donates $8,000 to this university. Kind of a great setup. He doesn't hard sell it, doesn't say, hey, it's tax deductible. It doesn't. Great deal for someone.
Doesn't mention cats.
Doesn't mention cats, I don't think. And essentially, true to form, the Porsche guys start lowballing him. All these guys start lowballing him.
That's so good.
And so he just goes down and throws it in the dumpster. Gone. Unused set. So for him, it's not about money. And it's one of the things I like about him. It's one of the things I actually enjoy in speaking with him. And over the years, at one point, we got to a place where I was working on a story, and it's still an ongoing story, through a series of freelancers, and we kept burning freelancers, because freelancers are relatively smart in the sense that they want to get paid they want to see some end goal. And with him, the end goal just kept getting moved out by years, because it's a hobby. And so at one point, I finally decided to put all the chips on the table and just said, Bob, all right, I was seeing that I was going to have to do the story myself if it was ever going to get published. And I said, Bob, a lot of people would say, so you're making this car lightweight and you're getting rid of the power windows? No. Bob, you're getting rid of the air conditioning? No. And he's got a 55-page list of carbon fiber, beryllium, and other modifications on this car. And I say, okay, so... And I'm guessing that at that time, a hot rod like what we're used to seeing, a cool RS, sort of replica or an Outlaw was $100,000, $150,000, $200,000. I'm guessing at that point he was somewhere around $3 to $6 million into this hot rod.
Oh, jeez.
And so I said, okay, so you're not.
Where is this car?
It's been in a magazine.
This car has some parts have filtered out.
So this is a $3 million.
It's green.
Yeah,
I've seen
$3 million
pictures.
Outlaw.
Yep.
That no one's seen, but I've seen some pictures.
There's some pictures of it.
Did I just see one on? I saw a little green Outlaw on Instagram this morning that R. Elfer posted. Do you happen to see this one? And I was looking at the front of it going, what car is that? It had a little Carrera stripe on the side of it that looked like an RS, but didn't look like it.
Shouldn't have a stripe on it.
It was like a Conda green car.
Yeah, this one's a 964.
Oh, it is.
And,
okay.
And so he's been working on it forever. And basically, he gets to this place where he's in the project, and I'm asking him all these questions about, well, okay, so you're getting rid of the Tiptronic, right? And he said, no. And I said, so you're spending unreal amounts of money to remove all this weight. And you're keeping power windows, you're keeping air conditioning, you're keeping the automatic transmission. So what are you going to do with it? Are you going to drive it? He says, no. And I said, well, this is where I decided to throw the chips down and just say, well, Bob, tell me here. A lot of people would say you're crazy. Tell me why you're not. I didn't know how he'd react to that question.
Great question. Come right out.
That's the interviewer way of saying, I think you're crazy.
Yes, exactly.
When you're taught how to interview
Except I'm
people,
not that smart.
you always attribute it to someone else. A lot of people would say, I've asked that question before, but that's always you. You think he might be crazy. And he said, no, I'm giving this car to my cat.
And he had a great answer. Yes.
And then the cat surgeon.
It's in memory of the
I've
cat.
saved so much weight with the tiny cat seats inside.
So he said,
harness.
he said, I am not a driver. He said, but if I can be interested, if I can be involved in the engineering of a thing, then I'm interested.
So, there was another part of the story that you just triggered in my mind. I do have a great lawyer's memory for the little weird scabs in the story. Mm-hmm. What does he drive? He drives only one kind of car.
I remember that.
I love this.
I remember.
Well, no, he doesn't drive. But at the time, for a while, he drove, and he told me about it.
He would rent
cars,
and he had a very specific
car that he rented.
He was really into the Geo Metro.
And he insisted on it.
It's another reason why I love this guy. And so,
the worst, shittiest car in the world.
Does he travel? Cheap. Will he come out here and come on this podcast and talk
I
to
doubt
us?
that. I highly doubt that.
Let's fly there.
We'll take the
guy.
briefcase and the microphones to him. Would he do that?
I don't know. Maybe I could talk to him about it.
We're going to have some outreach.
What was the passion for the Geo Metro? The most basic, shittiest form of transportation.
I think
besides
now we're getting
Yugo.
into a DSM-4 issue. Right?
Yes.
I don't know on that front. But the great
personality disorder.
But the great Geo Metro disorder, anxiety. What?
So, but the great story with that was he ended up going to his local Hertz or whatever counter one day. And Manhattan, of course, you have multiple.
Yep.
So he goes down and they say, "Well, we're sorry, we don't have a Geo Metro today." I said, "Well, where's the closest one? Mm-hmm. Which store does?" And so they said, "Oh, 5 blocks over here or whatever." So he starts walking over to this other place to get his Geo Metro and walks by. It must be Manhattan Mercedes, whatever the dealer there is. And so they had I think it was a CL600. It was a V12 coupe in the window. And so he walks up to the door, doesn't set foot in the place, and says, gets the attention of one of the salespeople and says, what's that? I think that's all he asks. He says, what's that? And this is a guy who typically is not wearing a suit, not into that whole thing.
He looks like a cat guy.
Yeah. So he says he's not playing that game. So he just says, what is that? And they say, well, that's the CL600 or whatever it was, and it's a V12 coupe, and so he says, and how much is it? And he says, well, if you can have it on the sidewalk in 5 minutes, I'll take it. Mm-hmm. And they said, oh, great. Well, come on in and we'll do paperwork. He said, no.
You didn't hear what I said.
If you can have it on the sidewalk with the keys in it in 5 minutes, I'll take the car and I'll pay you now. Sure enough, 4 minutes later, car was on the street with a key in it, and off he went.
To go get his Geo
The stories
Metro.
of this guy are endless. I mean, there's many others.
He talks like a Bond villain, like with the cat, petting his cat the whole time. What's that? Bring it to the sidewalk right now, and I'll take it. He's just a big white kitty cat, and what an interesting guy.
He is an interesting guy.
How many Porsches does this guy have? And he never shows this stuff, and we don't see him at events.
He has shown it. He has shown it at times. Mostly in the past, he has shown some cars, and I would say he's got 3 or 4 right now. He's not a big volume collector.
But if you go on the old forums, you'll see some of the pictures of the last 930 and also the green car.
Yeah,
when
that's
there was a moment he was engaged in sharing technical details.
Yeah, he's very private, but on the other hand, he is on the forums occasionally. He doesn't put his name there particularly, but everybody knows who he is. With people have addressed him by his first name. So he's not completely secretive. I just want to be respectful of him. He's grown to be a friend. I consider him a friend at this point. He's also surprised me because, it's it'd be easy to poke fun at the leather and the beryllium and the ridiculous pricing and everything else that he's spending into these cars. The cat, the planes,
the shuffling outside of dealerships,
all these things. But one time I'm talking to him. And I say, well, what's new? And he sends me this. He would send some of those photos he used to post on some of the forums.
Right.
And so he sends me a photo, and it looks like a damper for one of my old remote control cars from my teenage years, like an RC10 or a Tamiya, where you had these little aluminum dampers. It didn't look like anything special. Usually he sends you something that's a carbon fiber headlight or a carbon fiber damper or something wild. And so he sends this thing to me. It just looks like a cheap shock absorber. I said, well, what is this? And he says, that's for a Humvee. And I said, well, what do you mean? What are you doing with those? He said, well, the Defense Department called up, and they're having problems with losing our soldiers to IEDs. And the Humvee can't have an anti-roll bar because it's got to be a four-wheel drive vehicle. So it's got to have full droop, full compression on both sides of the vehicle. They can't be connected. So the military determined something, I might get the numbers wrong here, but something like 45% or 55% of the deaths were not being caused by the IED. It was by the driver's reaction and the vehicle flipping over. So they went to him and said, and his company, so he formed this company out of all of this Formula One expertise. And the Department of Defense went to him and said, can you help us fix this rollover problem?
Right.
And so they came up with a damper in aluminum, not expensive. Well, expensive, but not
How
wild.
about a roll bar?
Again, they had to be independent to avoid, they had full off-road ability. And so he came up with something to prevent a damper that allowed full compression and full droop independent of one another, but reduced the rollover rate. Maybe that was by 45%.
Wow,
but it was a significant improvement. And then when the government couldn't pay for the dampers, he offered, I believe, to lease them in the old way. So there's a guy that, it's easy to make fun of, but in terms of the money spent on this project car, but he went on to form a company that sold carbon fiber air boxes to Porsche for the 996 RSR. Remember the GT3 RSR had that carbon box and the lightweight wiring harness and the ceramic ball axles, all that stuff.
He's an innovator.
Well, if you like Porsches, you're always okay with us.
Yeah.
Even if you are nuts.
Yeah.
Because I think we're all
a little nuts, aren't
and
we?
And we are huge fans of Cat Bob, and I hope we get to meet him. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with Pete Stout. We're going to talk about 000 Magazine. Here are some useful car tips you might not be aware of. A coffee filter and a little bit of olive oil can clean your interior. Removing excess weight from your car will improve gas mileage, and you can place your key fob to your chin to increase its range. That's pretty weird, right? Well, here's another tip you also might not know about. TrueCar also helps people get used cars. That's right. TrueCar isn't just for buying new cars. With their certified dealer network and nationwide inventory of nearly 1 million used cars, you'll enjoy real pricing on actual inventory and a simpler buying experience, whether you buy new or used. And with TrueCar, users can see what others paid so they know if they're getting a good deal before they're buying. They're also more likely to enjoy a faster buying experience by connecting with TrueCar certified dealers. When you're ready to buy a new or used car, check out TrueCar and enjoy a more confident car buying experience. Some features not available in all states.
You're listening to Spike's Car Radio.
All right, we're back with more Spike's Car Radio. We're here with Pete Stout, Porsche enthusiast and Porsche journalist. I'm not going to make you an automotive journalist. You're a Porsche journalist. And I've got your new magazine right here, 000. First of all, the name. Let's explain the name. And two, here's something I want to know. Why are people getting into the magazine game right now? I know Hodinky and Ben Clymer, those guys just had a magazine, and I was kind of confused by that because I thought everything was online. Tell me why magazines?
Why magazine? Because I think it's a premium experience. I think there's some media that is just better consumed in print. I think that most media, if I was in the newspaper business, I'd be worried. And at some level, if I was in the magazine business as we've known it, I'd be worried. I did that business for 15 years at Excellence and to a lesser extent, a different way, 3 years at Panorama. Panorama will be fine. Panorama is part of a alternative kind of magazine. It exists for a different reason. It's part of your club membership, so that'll be fine.
So you join the Porsche Club, you get that magazine.
Exactly. So that magazine is going to be fine, as will magazines like Panorama, where
how much? Let me ask you
part
this.
of a package.
How much autonomy did you have at Panorama?
Quite a bit. The club was great that way.
Okay.
Yeah, the club was great that way. And that was really, in many ways, a gift from the editor before me, Betty Jo Turner. She was there for 43 years. When I think about magazines in general, forget Porsche magazines, I challenge you guys to name another editor that had a 43-year stint at any title. It's
Greg, what is Graydon Carter?
Vanity Fair, right?
Vanity Fair.
How long was it?
We don't know.
How long was yours?
This 43 years.
Okay, 44. She was 44. He was 44. No,
he
was pretty long.
You got this, Mike.
I'm trying to act smart. Like, I'm really keeping tabs on publishers.
I can't. I should have the answer follow up.
But
to
Graydon
that question.
Carter is the guy you think of, right?
Right.
And then Rolling Stone with
Jan Wenner.
Yeah, Jan
Wenner.
Wenner.
We'd have to. How long for Anna Wintour?
Right, Anna Wintour.
So she's up there with the big guns.
The big
my
guns.
Guess, but a club magazine, right? But she and her husband Leonard kept that thing going, and they ran that thing. They ran that thing
Leonard a funny name?
Because it's a funny name.
Yes.
Leonard.
It's like my grandfather's name, Morris.
Right.
Yours,
Abe, and my father Harvey.
Your father Harvey. Well, wait. What were we going to call our dealership?
Morris Abrahams.
Morris
Solomons.
Morris Solomon. Then who is Solomon?
My father's middle name.
Oh, okay. So Morris Solomon. Morris is my grandfather's first name, or was.
He's
done.
Morris Solomons purveyors.
So when we hear Leonard,
cause.
when we hear a Leonard.
Do I need to know more about this dealership? What was this dealership about?
We just have a name right now.
Oh, you got a name.
That's
we have
it.
a name.
Well, we
That's
have
only
a
part of the
space.
plan.
We
Yeah.
could use your space as
Right.
the dealership.
Okay.
Right.
And
And
all
we
I
just
need-
think Morris Solomons is a fine
a
car
purveyor
name.
of fine
So
automobiles.
you're zoned for commercial.
We're
you're
zoned
good to go.
for commercial. That's right.
And so this podcast is really just a lead up to the dealership.
Yes.
We've never said
The
that.
whole
You did.
business plan.
But we will be doing it shortly.
Right.
But let's get back
Since
to.
we're talking about monetizing media, basically the reason for
I just want to know
print-
why you did this. Like, what made you decide I'm going to just make this magazine?
My sense was that there's a spot on the landscape that was unserved. And my sense was that as the Porsche hobby has become more sophisticated and as the length of the company's backstory and back catalog has grown, as the size of that's grown, my feeling was that there was a place for a magazine that reflected the quality of the cars a little bit more closely, but also was less advertising. Both of the magazines I worked for in the past had somewhere between 55 and 70% advertising.
Right.
And all of these readers were saying, I keep every issue. And I go back to them. And I was thinking, man, we're asking you to keep a lot of paper that's ads. And so what would it look like?
Especially that weird parts ad of the guy sitting in the toilet. Remember that guy?
That was an odd one. There's been some
I used
other
to come
ads
and complain to you about that when you got to get rid of that guy.
Yes.
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 I don't want to be sitting on the toilet and see another guy sitting on the toilet when I'm looking at car magazines.
Well, and I had a Porsche executive when I shared the redesign of Panorama with this Porsche executive, a German guy, and I shared it with him on an iPad, which was new. And when we relaunched, we launched with an iPad, a PDF version, and I handed it to him at an event. And he looked very emotional guy. Not what you expect from the executive. And he looks down and he swipes a few pages and he looks at me almost apoplectic and says, "You have done it." And then he looks some more and he finds one of these terrible, really ugly ads and says, "Oh, but you must get rid of these ads."
The other one I don't like is the guy in the engine bay poking his head out and waving.
That one's disturbing too.
Yeah,
that's not what's supposed to be there.
I don't want to see your
that's
head.
That's going to wake you
I
up
don't
at
like
night.
That.
That's going
offensive.
to wake you up at night.
Yeah.
You're later going to think about your 911 having some guy in it.
Yeah,
When you
all
open
that
the lid.
stuff.
You don't,
I don't know
want
why,
to open
but
the lid anymore.
It would get me upset.
But that got me. But I looked at that executive and I basically said, "No, you have to keep these ads in this magazine because this is a club magazine,
right.
and these companies help
They
propel
do.
and move
Right.
the club forward."
Well,
so
we
you
also
can't
it's a place for us to go to find the parts. Even toilet guy to go. I may need something from him,
and
so
at the
it's
end
good
of the
to have
day,
that number.
At the end of the day, those ads, as in other magazines like Excellence or so many others on the old model of magazines, they are responsible for the cost of the magazine. The ads are what make the magazine go, and that model's fine if you can make it work. But I wanted to change the game and say, what would it look like in this crazy world where we're always looking at screens and we're always everything's coming at us, and I was getting Evo, which I love, but they would start to stack up, and I couldn't keep up with them. 10, 12, whatever were showing up, and I'd start to feel bad about how many were stacking up, and a lot of ads stacking up on my coffee table. And so I thought, well, what would it be like if we hit pause and said 4 times a year something comes, and it shows up, and it's beautifully made. It's got an embossed cover. It's got various surfaces on that cover. The paper stock is heavier. The interior paper stock is heavier than most magazine covers. What does that look like? And what could that be like where you create something where if someone's going to keep it, they have something to go back to for years?
Yeah, it's approaching coffee book status here.
And the only reason we call it a magazine, you mentioned that earlier, is that we want it to be approachable like a magazine.
Right.
That's why we did a soft cover.
I'm noticing
cover.
right away subscription cards didn't fall out of it.
No. Yeah, we also wanted to get away from the hard sell. We wanted to get away from all that stuff.
So how do you do that? Who did you partner with? Do you have a team? How does that work?
Sure.
Like, what does your operation look like here?
For sure. So partner in this venture is Alex Pilevsky, who I used to work with at Sports Car International. We worked there for 2 years together and formed a friendship around cars.
So you guys are the Woodward and Bernstein.
You got it.
He's sitting out there right now. There he is.
And
waving to him. He's falling asleep. I think we
happen.
put him to sleep.
That can happen. But just great guy from way back when, and he was a sounding board all through the formation of this project. And when the person who kind of inspired me to think this way, basically a guy came along and said, saw what you did, excellent, saw what you did at Panorama, I'd like to see what you can do with a clean slate, and I'll be your bank on it.
So there you go. So you got a money guy.
That was really the beginning. And then that guy's company had requirements of him that were much more important than me. We're talking about thousands of employees.
Right.
Other things happened, and he suddenly had much greater responsibilities than a hobby side project. And when I called 2 friends, one was Jeff Swart and the other was Alex, to kind of cry on their shoulders the night that it looked like it was going to fall apart, both of them independently told me a joke, which is your business. And
what's the joke?
I don't remember, but it didn't work. I remember that I didn't laugh at either joke.
They were trying to cheer you up.
They were trying to cheer me up.
So your money falls through. So you have this maybe this dummied up version of the magazine that you're going to make.
We're pretty far along.
You're pretty far
along in the concept of this thing.
And the funding falls out. So what happens?
Next day I get a text from Alex, and he says, look, I think I can find you the money.
Right.
Call me this afternoon. I think I can find the money. Call me this afternoon. And I call him next day or call him that afternoon, and he says, hey, I want to see you do this, and here's how I think we could do this. And my first thought was, whatever this could be, I don't want it more than our friendship, because we'd been friends at that point 20 years. He said, no, it doesn't have to be that way. We'll set this up the right way. And so we launched in late 2016. I left Panorama in June, I believe it was, or May, and took a month off just to go sink my feet in some sand in Hawaii, and then launched in July. Or I started working in July, and we launched late 16.
Now, are you doing all the writing, or some of it's freelance?
No, for sure
and
not.
The photography,
we hire
it's
freelance.
It's a spectacular-looking deal
thank
here.
You. It's the work of a lot of people and a lot of conscious choices. One was we partnered with Jeff Swart, who everyone knows, and I've worked with. He's been a mentor for me for probably a decade now, as well as a friend. But then additionally, we specifically did not want to hire a car magazine designer. So the designer of 000 and largely responsible for the look of the magazine is a guy named Justin Page, and he's ex-Playboy by way of East Bay Express and SF Weekly. You can cue the jokes from here.
But it doesn't
to car
look
porn.
It doesn't look like 60s Playboy.
No, Justin's. If you look at his background,
he's get a hold of it. And go, the haunches on that 73 RS.
It's like a fine design.
Well, that's what it was supposed to be.
And that's what I love about it. It's not like popular science.
Just right from the cover, every picture makes you
what I
say
want.
that.
It's what I want to aspire to. It's what I want my hobby to be about.
Well, and Justin got it from the get-go. When I told him what I wanted it to look like roughly, I don't know how to get it there, but I know what I wanted. And when Justin heard our brief, he basically said, it's simple is harder. He said, simple's harder.
What's nice about it is beautiful photography, but it's also not going to overwhelm me with words. Like, do you know what? Sometimes I get intimidated, like you're saying. You get all these magazines, you're like, God, this is really going to be a chore to get through it. And I've got my work, I've got kids, I have the wife. And how do I get through this? And then like you say, you start to feel guilty,
well, and
right? And as I'm going through this, I'm going, God, this is perfect. There's bite-sized paragraphs here. The pictures are
something
big,
that you
beautiful,
can look
and
at
colored.
for 3 months and get through.
You can keep visiting with it and look through it. But I know I'm going to be able to digest some of the information in there because it's a lot simpler.
So beautifully put
and
together.
It's based on a visual experience more than a word experience.
I mean, you talk about, too, is if you have 3 month, you can be intentional in a way at 3 months. I wanted everything about it to be different than the way I'd done things in the past. Mm-hmm. I think all of us, whatever our career is, whether it's soup Nazi in our background or whatever it is, we're always looking for what's next and how do we take what we've learned and be smarter about how we use it. And so you look at that story of in this issue on the RS, that's the 72 Paris show car. It's important enough in itself, but that wasn't enough of a story. We wanted to also be about the 17 cars delivered as homologation cars. And almost no one knows that story.
Yeah.
Except for Conrad Scheim.
Well, so who did we go to? Who did we go to? We went to Mater. Christoph Mater, and he told the story expertly. He and I paired up on it, but he really deserves
all
the
this
bulk
weird
of the
shit
credit.
About driving to the wait stations. And,
yes,
and
he
all
uncovered all that
bizarre.
stuff, along with guys like Kerry Morris, who has just a wealth of documentation. So those stories, when you have a 3 month or a 6 month or a year-long timeline, you end up with a wealth of information. When I talked to Christoph about this story, he said, even in our book, even in Conrad Simon Gruber's book, which is the defining work on the RS-27, without question, either of the versions of that book, Mater said, even in our book, we don't have very much about really a paragraph or two about the homologation cars. He said, so this is an interesting project.
It's funny because the Crevier guy had one for sale about 2 years ago, the yellow one, and they were.
It was on eBay, as a matter of fact.
And everybody
you can buy anything on eBay.
And unbelievably, it did not at that point have sex appeal. People were not understanding how special it was, and he didn't want a ton of money for it. And now the desirability is going to be explained.
Once it's documented in this way, I mean, Christoph went nuts with the research, and we were able to use the appendix to do that, to show just how rare, how unusual, some of the documents.
I love
all this stuff.
The weird handwritten, and there's a certain type of German script that they would write with, the way they make the letters look. It's all in there. It's beautiful.
These are all the perversions of our hobby.
Right, that we get off on that.
Yeah.
German writing.
Really?
Someone's handwriting.
Perhaps.
Someone's handwriting in German.
The way
Somehow
the
it's
Germans write.
So if someone wants to subscribe, how does that work? There's not going to be like a school kid that knocks on the door and go, "You want a magazine subscription?"
Right. It's right to our
000.
website, which is easily Googleable. Or you just go directly to it. It's 000magazine.com.
And I'm sure you have Instagram, right?
Yep.
That would probably
We're
be
on
your
Instagram
primary
as well,
social
and
media,
Facebook.
right?
We played with Twitter, but we didn't see a lot of value
Twitter's
there.
not going to do anything
No.
in the car. It's really interesting, that platform. It's hard to really make the car picture thing work on Twitter.
You've got
Twitter's more of a news feed for happening news, and that's it. But Instagram is perfect because that's the aesthetic, the photographic aesthetic. Yeah, I know. My lisp came out there. That I think is a nice entry point for people who are thinking about subscribing to the magazine. You definitely should, because it's spectacular. Now here's the question: Do I keep the magazine?
Freaky documents.
There it is. Do I keep the magazine when I get it? Like,
You
what
do
do I do with it now that I subscribe? I get 4 a year. What am I?
You do with it whatever you want.
You never
with
throw it away.
To me, it was built to last, and it's built to keep.
It certainly is. It's gorgeous.
And I don't know if anybody's explained these. We've never really talked about them. These stripes here, those are one of Justin's.
So on the binding, there's little
colored stripes.
that
and
look
initially,
like
kind of like a pool cue or something.
it's almost like the Paul Smith. I don't know the clothing designer Paul Smith.
So, I asked Justin what that was about, and he said, that's so that if you're looking for an article on that Aubergine RS that happened in a certain year, you can find it. And I thought, genius, because when I used to try to find old articles in Excellence, I'd look at all those bindings on my shelf. And
So
I knew,
you find it based on the color?
Yeah, I knew roughly when that article on Jeff Smith's Red Hot Rod that Dario Franchitti now owns, I knew roughly that was somewhere around 2007 that we did that story. I remember the title of the story, Weapon of Mass Destruction. I remember the author, David Conklin. But I can't remember which issue that year. If I'd had this, I could have found it. I could have
This will help.
Yeah, you just look.
And if I throw toothpicks on the ground, you'll say 876.
Yes,
just like Rain Man.
Oh, yes, exactly.
We don't have that much longer that we can record, but I want to just talk about the new stuff.
Okay.
So how close to the factory are you these days? Still pretty close with them?
I tend to go over 3 to 4 times a year.
What do you know? What's going on? Because we've heard a lot of talk about new models rolling out. We've heard talk about a slant nose.
Yes.
Ooh.
New slant nose Porsche. Have you heard those rumors?
I cannot confirm or
well,
deny
you don't work
that
for the factory.
rumor. I don't work for the factory. No, that's one I haven't heard too much
This is what I've learned watching all this Trump stuff is when someone says I can't comment on it, that means yes. Yes. Because you can comment, you can say no. That's not true.
I can't deny that.
I can't deny that means a yes. Okay, so we know that's happening. And then there's also been this talk of this speedster, this GT3 engined speedster. He's nodding his head, yes.
That's a very likely
That's
case.
very likely, right.
And
is it? Okay, now, well, wait. Before I want to hear, is there anything else? Have you heard? And I know you're not going to tell us what, but there's stuff beyond that stuff.
Well, there's always stuff beyond that stuff, isn't there?
In this 991.2 line is what I'm saying.
Oh, I don't know how much there is past. We just had the Touring, the T. We've got the RS.
Right, the GT2 RS.
I think we will see a speedster. That's my sense, but I don't know.
But how many
that.
will we see? Enough to satisfy the crowd?
That's a big question. I mean, all the rumors point to speedster, but one thing to remember in all this is the T caught everyone off guard.
Right.
Even Preuninger, I was with him on the event in France.
Angry
and
Andy.
He was sort of like, I didn't even know. I mean,
he didn't know about it.
It went under. It went
what?
It went
what
under.
Does that mean?
It went under everyone's radar.
Come on.
It was ridiculous.
Skunk Works.
It really was a Skunk Works car, and I kind of love it because it was sort of the production side.
I love that car.
The production side guys,
right,
kind of got to do a sort of GT car. Now,
special car,
right?
The Speedster is very interesting. It kind of circles back to our original topic of discussion, and that is Cat Bob, and in a way, I have to wonder if I don't know and I haven't confirmed it, but I have to wonder if at some level old Cat Bob didn't help because Cat Bob did a 911R and got exclusive, heavily involved, doing all sorts of things. What can you do? What is possible? And from what I've understood, for some years, the exclusive and the GT departments weren't warring, but they weren't working together, and that the 997 Speedster and 997, what was it, the Sport Classic?
Right.
Who a friend was heavily involved in, this guy Tillman Broadbeck, the father of the Ducktail.
It's a very cool car.
Really neat guy. That was his last car as the head of exclusive. And so Tillman didn't tell me this, but I've gotten enough sense, and next time I have dinner with Tillman, I'm going to have to grill him a bit. But I got the sense that the Sport Classic and the last Speedster, the 997, they were both supposed to have GT3 engines. And the GT department, someone in the GT department said, no way. Those are ours. Those are not for you. And if the rumor proves true and the Speedster gets the GT3 engine, then it becomes a unique product. If you go back to that 997 Speedster, for me, it was kind of a miss. Because, first of all, I didn't love it visually. Visually, I thought it was kind of bulky in the back and kind of just...
It was just a gimmick.
It just was a gimmick. But the biggest thing was Alex and I drove a 997 Carrera GTS Cabrio 6-speed manual with a Speedster 6-speed manual back-to-back. They drove the same.
Yeah.
And so it was double the price
for
a car that drove the same and looked worse.
Yeah.
So,
and these things are jamming up in value right now. And
right, and I don't see the value in those personally.
Right,
It's not. I just don't get those cars personally. But everybody has their taste. But if that car had had a 997 GT3 3.8, or if that car had a 4-liter, so you would have had a GT3 open top.
Look at that little perspective he's provided on this car now.
Now
really
I
completely understand
putting the curtain back on it. On decision making, and we wonder why. There's a reason things don't catch on. Like that 997 Speedster never appealed to us, and there's a very good reason why that we couldn't articulate.
So Cat Bob didn't take credit for it, but I got the sense that in the midst of his R project, he got people to talk in departments that hadn't talked in a while. And what I have noticed is the two departments are cooperating, and next issue we've got a piece that's just about carbon fiber exposed, with both groups talking about that.
We could make Cat Bob and Jerry a very powerful. If we bring them together, they could be a
You just said one of the greatest titles ever for Cat Bob and Jerry is the name of the episode. We have to go to New York and record.
Alongside
right? We have to do that.
alongside your dealership, it can be an ice cream or a frozen yogurt.
And that'll
place.
be the beginning. We'll put them together organically, and
then feed them the ideas that we want developed. And between the two of them, we will get exactly what we want.
I think it's a plan.
Pete, it's been a pleasure having you here, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We're out of time. We have to clear the studio for the next big show rolling through. Come back, though, man.
Yeah.
I'd love to come back and have a conversation, or have you back and have a conversation just about it. All things Porsche. I know the listeners really love it. The magazine is called 000. You got to subscribe. It's beautiful. If you love Porsches, you love good photography, you're going to love this. Mr. Zuckerman, you can catch up with on Instagram. He's at The Real Zuckerman. And, of course, if you've been injured by a self-driving car, if you've been run down by a self-driving car.
Piloted by a felon.
Piloted by a felon.
You will see Paul's name on the inside of the ambulance doors.
Right.
That's how he gets the money for all his Porsches. He wins. And I'm Spike Ferriston. You can catch up with me on Instagram. That's where I am most social with you. I love you all, everybody. We'll see you next week on Spike's Car Radio.
Thank you.
That was very weird.
You're weird.
You're weird. You and your taproot.
Thanks for listening to Spike's Car Radio. Download new episodes every Wednesday on the Podcast One app or subscribe now at Apple Podcasts or PodcastOne.com.
Podcast One Sports would like to congratulate Dan Patrick for his hard-earned Emmy nomination at this year's Sports Emmy Awards. With A-list guests from the world of sports, Dan Patrick brings you the inside scoop with a dose of humor.
People are going to bet on that game because they have to have a reason to watch that game.
Congratulations, Dan, and thank you for another year of the finest sportscasting around.
This guy's got it.
Check out the Dan Patrick Show every weekday on Podcast One Sports and Apple Podcasts. And remember to rate and review.